We're going to show you some of our top posterior exercises in glutes and hamstrings and the positions that you need to be in for them to be effective.
So drill number one when it comes to the posterior chain that we love is going to involve a band. It's the banded hip extension. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this band, I'm gonna hook it to a rig post or something that you can hook your band to. It's about 6 to 12 inches between my ankle and my knee. Then from here, I'm gonna actually step into the band and I'm gonna bring it into my hip crease. From here, we're gonna do a tall kneeling version, which means I'm down on the ground. Instead of with my knees under my hip, I'm gonna bring them slightly wider to about my shoulder width. So what this band is wanting to do is it's wanting to pull me back towards the rig post. So I'm gonna think about tucking my chin and keeping my spine neutral as I break at the hip, hinging, letting the band pull my hips back. I can feel my glutes stretch, and then I'm gonna extend by squeezing my glutes and driving through my knees. So this drill is one of my absolute favorites because it doesn't require a lot of weight or equipment. I love to use this as part of my warm-up if I know I'm gonna be squatting or if I know that I'm gonna be using my posterior chain often. It can also serve as a really great cool down. When our glutes and our hamstrings are working properly, our back is gonna do less work. So we wanna make sure when we're doing this drill, we don't feel our back kicking on, but we feel just our glute working.
All right, our next exercise, which is gonna be one of my favorites, is gonna be the Bulgarian split squat. It is very effective and it also has a lot of variety. So you can attack this in a lot of different ways. We can do this with body weight. We can load them in a farmer's hold, a goblet hold, back rack, front rack. There's a lot of different ways for these to be effective. We can do them light, we can do them heavy. We can also make them quad dominant if we want to, but today we're talking about the posterior. So to get set up for these to target our posterior, meaning our glutes and our hamstrings, we're gonna want a nice healthy step away from the bench. I'm gonna have my back foot up on top of a bench, and I want my shoelaces flat. My back foot is only there for support. It's not a working leg. For this to be a posterior exercise, I need to drop my hips back and down. I need to be sure that my front shin is nice and vertical. So dropping back and down, I've got a vertical shin at the bottom, my foot's nice and flat. I'm gonna squeeze my glutes to bring myself back up, and my back foot's just gently resting on the bench. Normally we'll work through an entire set on one leg before swapping and doing the opposite leg. If you notice that your knee is going over top of your toe, that typically means we're gonna be using or engaging our quad, but today we're talking about posterior, so that's something that we're looking to avoid.
So our next exercise that we love to use for the posterior chain is gonna be a dumbbell sumo stance squat. And for this squat, we're not actually gonna stand all the way up. So you're gonna keep your hip slightly closed at the top of the rep, which is gonna tension the hamstrings and the glutes. So for starters, I always recommend doing a few reps with a lighter weight. 3 sets of 10 to 12 reps is gonna be really great for this exercise. So the first thing I'm gonna do is take my feet and bring them slightly wider than shoulder stance. I'm gonna have my dumbbell in between. I'm gonna take my hands over top of each other. So from here, I'm grabbing the dumbbell and then I'm gonna pull my hips down, sitting back into the squat so I can feel my glutes and hamstrings engaged. Then I'm gonna think about pushing through the floor, squeezing my glutes as I stand up, but my torso is still staying slightly forward. So that way I'm weighting my glutes and my hamstrings with a slight hinge, keeping this dumbbell out in front.
The next one's gonna be another dynamic movement, which is gonna be a deficit lunge. We can set this up a lot of different ways, kind of similar to the Bulgarian split squat. We can regulate the difficulty by the height of our deficit. This is about a 4-inch deficit, which is normally a pretty good height for most people. You can start a little bit lower, or you can actually make that higher. Both feet will start on the elevated surface, and we'll take a nice healthy step back, just like our Bulgarian split squat. And when we drop down, we again want a nice vertical shin. We'll squeeze and stand, bringing both feet back to the top. We can also do these alternating between legs, so alternating reps, or we can go all on one side and then all on the opposite side. Similar to a Bulgarian split squat, we can do these with a loaded barbell on our back, farmer's hold, a goblet hold. We can do them light for volume. We can do them on the same side for volume, or we can alternate legs and maybe be a little bit lighter. So it's a very dynamic movement and it's great for targeting the posterior.
Okay, so our next exercise is going to be a single leg RDL, and we have 2 versions for this. So the first version, we are gonna start with 1 foot in a staggered stance. So all of my weight is gonna be on my working leg, which is going to be my front leg. The back leg is just a kickstand, and think of your back toe is in line with your front heel. We're gonna have the weight on the working leg, which is our front leg. So I'm gonna have 1 dumbbell, and it's gonna be on the side of my working leg. From here, I wanna think about keeping my midline tight, my chin slightly tucked. I'm gonna have a soft, healthy bend in my front knee. So I'm gonna think about reaching those hips back, pushing my hips as far back behind as I can, feeling a nice good stretch through my hamstring and glute, and then I'm gonna drive through my heel and squeeze my butt. So I don't want to rotate with this weight. I just wanna think about my hips being pulled towards the wall behind me as far as I can possibly go, keeping that soft bend in my knee, and then drive through my heel and squeeze my glute. Version 2 is gonna be the exact same thing, but instead of having our foot back, as a kickstand, we're actually gonna place it on the wall behind us to help us with our balance and really be able to load the working leg. If you find that you don't feel like you're comfortable loading that working leg, this is a really great way to take the non-working leg out of the equation and just really focus on reaching the hips back. The other thing to think about on both of these versions, version 1 and the one I'm about to show you, is having a vertical shin and your weight towards your heel. Our knee should not be going out over our toe because that will mean we're activating our quads. We wanna make sure that we're activating the hamstrings and the glutes, so we need the weight towards the heel and the shin vertical. So I'm gonna step away from the wall, about 2 to 3 steps away. From here, go ahead and pick up your dumbbell, and then we're going to take our non-working leg and post it back to the wall. So I'm pushing that foot into the wall to create some stability. From here, I'm just gonna focus on reaching my hips back as much as I can, feeling a nice good stretch, and then drive through my heel and squeeze my glute.
All right, our next one's gonna be a traditional RDL. We can set this up in quite a few different ways as well, but there's gonna be some common themes that we wanna be focused on. So with our RDL, I can use dumbbells, kettlebells, and a barbell. Both feet are gonna be about hip width apart. I want them a little bit more narrow, and I want my toes pointed forward. The key here is I'm gonna start with a soft bend of my knees, and once I've got that soft bend, I'm no longer gonna bend my knees, and I'm no longer gonna bend my hips up and down. I'm gonna lock my knees in place, pull my shoulder blades back and down. Typically, I'm gonna be holding maybe some dumbbells or a barbell, and from here, the only thing that I'm focused on is pushing my hips back behind me. I'm loading my hamstrings up on the way down, and then I'm squeezing my glutes to bring my chest back up. My chest coming back up is a byproduct. It's not the thing that I'm focusing on. I'm squeezing my glutes so hard that my chest comes back up. Something that can be maybe a misconception or people maybe struggle with a little bit is sometimes if they don't feel it in their posterior, maybe they're a little bit more quad dominant, they wanna keep their hips in a stationary spot and lean their chest forward. Sometimes there's a mind muscle connection where you don't feel like you're doing that, but if you're noticing that you're feeling an RDL or even a deadlift more so in your back than you do your posterior chain, that's gonna be the thing that needs to change. We need to think about reaching our hips back as far as we can behind us. That's what's loading and stretching our posterior chain, and then squeezing to come back up. If my hips aren't moving or if they're dropping down, that's something that we need to avoid, and it's not the position we're looking for to be sure that we're targeting our glutes and our hamstrings. So these are some of our favorite posterior exercises. So we can kind of break these down into 3 different groups. We can use primers. So if we're going to be doing a posterior day, some things that we can do to prime the muscle group that we want to be using to where we're sure that we've got some blood flow there, we've got a mind muscle connection, and that muscle group is warmed up and turned on. So we didn't necessarily touch on all these, but that may be something like a banded kickback, banded hamstring curls. Then we've got our primary compound movements. If you're wanting to grow the muscle, we're wanting to go heavier with maybe 8 to 10 reps. Things like our Bulgarian split squats or heavier back rack lunges. Those are great compound lifts that are gonna help us build muscle. Then we've got accessory work, which we may do after one of our compound movements, which is gonna kind of help maybe be a finisher. So again, a higher volume, a little bit lighter weight, but not so much of a warm up. We're actually still looking to push and fatigue the muscle past what we've done in our primary movement. That would be maybe any of these, but just at a lighter weight and higher volume. We hope this has been helpful for you guys. If you guys have questions or you'd like to see other muscle groups or exercises gone over, put that in the comments below and we'll see you guys in the next video.